this episode of the Atlantic Center for Independent Living podcast. I'm here with the director of HIP, the Heightened Independent Living Center. Now, do you guys say Center for Independent Living, or do you guys say Independent Living Center?
We changed. We evolved with the times. So we're Center for Independent Living, Heightened Independence and Progress, which is a mouthful all on its own. So we like to call ourselves HIP, Center for Independent Living.
And aren't you technically the president? Don't you have the president title?
Yeah, I'm president and CEO because we have a satellite, and we have a very capable director on that satellite in Jersey City. But I kind of have the umbrella.
So this is Brian Fitzgibbons, everybody, and he is been in the independent living world for a long time, both in government and then he became a director. So I just want to get started right away with, when did you first hear about independent living? Like, when did you first hear about this thing called independent living?
I was just thinking about this. Many of you, nobody knows this. I started out as a vocational rehab counselor for DVR in 1975. And those of you who know the Rehab Act know that in 1973, they mentioned independent living, but in 1978, it was put in the law as something that could be funded. And I remember called to a meeting at Kessler Institute in West Orange, and we were told all about what this new thing was going to be called as independent living, which would help people with disabilities. Now, I had only helped people with disabilities get jobs and training and get jobs, but this was going to be helping them through the whole life experience. It was funny that one of the things that they mentioned was, teaching somebody how to go get a haircut. So I found funny. In the 70s, we all had a lot more hair than we do.
Yes, it was important.
Yes, it was a little bit how to maneuver the community. And that really appealed to me because one of the things as a vocational rehab counselor was I would sit there for the hour or two that I had my consumer with me. Well, what else are you doing? What do you do on the weekends? What do you do now? It's all part of the life experience, and no one talked about that stuff. And I really wasn't supposed to be. I was supposed to only be talking about what their qualifications would be. But how do you know what someone's qualifications would be unless you don't know the whole person? So we wanted to know a little bit about, and people needed outlets. Where are they going to go have fun? Where are they going to, can they meet people? So technically, it was around 1978, and then because HIP started in the community in which I lived, basically, I lived in Teaneck. No, at that time I didn't. I lived in Bergen County, nevertheless. I lived someplace else in Bergen County, but it started out in Englewood, and I started to get to know the person that started it, Eileen Goff, very capable, phenomenal woman, and I got on their board, but was unceremonially thrown off the board because as a state worker, I wasn't allowed to be on the board because of the feds got me. They didn't want me there. So anyway, so I stayed interested though. I went to some of the events, some of the parties, et cetera, and I kept my hand in. And then as I grew in the agency, and many of you, nobody knows this again, but my experience at DVR is split into three separate parts. The front line, which would be from the first 12 years of my experience there. Then I went into administration where I became the training coordinator and kind of liaison to a lot of different programs. And then finally to executive management, when I did a lot of work with, I was privileged to be able to work with the statewide Independent Living Council and to get to know everybody in who ran Centers for Independent Living. By the time I was a chief and then the assistant director, there were 12. I got to know pretty much everybody and enjoyed interacting. And I loved watching all the different things that people could do in independent living. And I had the power, happily, to be able to fund an education counseling component to the centers. So I was able, with the collaboration of the New Jersey State Department of Ed, we each kicked in for $50,000 for each center to do a transition counselor in the schools. And we did that for 4 years until the feds decided it wasn't appropriate, which I never quite understood. So we did a little bit of that, and then we help everybody do a lot of things with independent living. So, and as it turns out, when I worked in the Jersey City office when I was a young counselor, in 1988, we invited the two people from the Commission for the Blind who were told that they should be starting Center for Independent Living in Hudson County. We gave them office space and we incubated them for 5 years. And so that's kind of like how my connection with Jersey City always came about, and that was my home county. I lived in Hudson County when I was a kid. So we did a lot of stuff about independent living. I feel like I've been doing it forever.
That's so awesome. I love what you said about how independent living is more about getting to know the whole person. And I think that haircut thing, even though it sounds like, what's that got to do with independent living? That is kind of the basic question. I always say we're about like filling the gaps. Like a lot of agencies or resources, they'll like give you an application or give you a task, but not really talk about like the skills to accomplish that. Like fill out the SNAP application. Well, that assumes like you know how to fill out an application. Like go get a haircut. Well, that assumes you know how to call somebody, get a haircut, pay for it, ask for what you need, deal with the social situation. So we're about, helping people navigate the life stuff that sometimes people who do it every day take for granted.
Absolutely. And we do a good job of it, don't you think?
Yes, yeah, we do. I think we do a good job too. So how did the first, I was fascinated what you said, because you were there at the beginning, how it was started in New Jersey, how there were people just working at an office space in DVR. So is that how a lot of these sales started?
Well, no, I did that one in 1988 for the satellite office.
Okay.
But the two that came about they had naturally the Federal Register put money out there and said that there was going to be enough money in New Jersey to establish 2 centers for independent living. And there were some grassroots movements in Passaic and Essex, and that would be Dial. And then there was some grassroots movement in Bergen, and that would be HIP. So they're the first 2. Dial beat us by about 5 months. So they were the first established. They were established by a very dynamic man named Gordon Anthony. He was a wheelchair user himself, and he was a real activist. And so he started out in Passaic and branched into Essex County. Those are 2 big counties to be doing anything in. So he did that, and then we did Bergen, but we didn't branch into Hudson for 8 years. Took us a while. But in the meantime, and I would have liked to say that DVR could have incubated everybody, but that was not the intent. So HIP was incubated in a neighborhood center in Englewood. It's now called Bergen Promise, but it's something that we just worked within a space. We were in but not of, and that's kind of, we had to have some place to live. So a lot of the centers for independent living lived in church basements. They lived in they went wherever they could get free space because there was no money. And in those days, DVR was much more actively involved in how the money worked and who did what and who got what. So little by little, as well, one of my pet peeves with independent living is that it's a grassroots movement, but they have bureaucratized it to the point of it's just too bureaucratic now. I mean, I grant you it's federal money and we have to get federal money, but there are so many people who are purists and say, well, they can't get any help from anybody. Well, in fact, one of the things that works the best in my estimation is if a center is somewhat taken under the wing of somebody for at least 3 years, just to get started. Just doing stuff like doing leases. A lot of us didn't get trained in school to how to read a lease. And I mean, you're an attorney. I'm sure you.
Yes, but like as you were saying, that's how my cell started. Was we were under originally the Mental Health Association for 3 years, which did help. I mean, because like you said, it's a lot harder to run a cell than people think. It's the money just doesn't fly out of the sky, and now it's you got to make sure you're complying with all the regulations and you're doing the reports right. So it's good to have that incubation. I agree.
And then trying to raise a board. There are 3 types of boards. There's wisdom, wealth, and work. And the wisdom ones, we got that. And we all have very smart people on our boards. Whether we have wealthy people on our boards is another story, because it would be nice to have a couple of people who were trust fund babies or whatever that could give us a donation every now and then. But mostly it's work. A lot of the folks want to, they run off fundraisers, they run, they come up with ideas, etc. So I have found that the challenge is getting a board, a stable board, to be one of the biggest challenges, and it's difficult to raise a board. I don't know if we're sexy enough to be the kind of board that people want to put on their resume. We're not the kind of boards that have galas and they appear in those nice glossy magazines or on the society pages, etc. We're just not like that.
Right, right. It usually you have to have mission driven. Most of our great board members are mission driven people.
Very mission
Right,
driven.
it doesn't attract. We're not having the fancy galas or the fancy charity events or throwing money around. It's not like that, which would be helpful, but it's just not. It's just not what sales attract. So how have sales? You're talking about it a little bit, but how have they evolved since you started? How have they evolved since?
Well, thanks to the state plan, which sometimes looks a little tedious once in a while, but the state plan for independent living is put together by the Silk in collaboration with the two agencies that were considered the designated state units. They were DVR and the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. You had to sign off from the three places. But now the Commission for the Blind has kind of taken a bit of a back seat, and now the designated state entity is what it's called, is still DVR. But anyway, the state plan for independent living gets written and decides which counties. First of all, the intent was to make sure that the entire state was covered. We can't have 21 centers for independent living. It's just, we don't have the funding for that. But we did have the funding to cover all 21 counties, which is what we do now. And so some of the counties have several catchment areas that include 2 or 3 counties. One of them, the SIL SJ, not SIL SJ, ACI, they do 3 counties. So, I mean, there's a lot of counties. And down at the southern end of the state, you see how Lisa is dividing up all her counties in some of the more rural areas. Up by us here in northern New Jersey, we have got plenty of people to work with, but not enough resources. But we do have competing resources as well that do help us out, that we collaborate with. So we're lucky. We're very lucky to have the counties. The counties have stepped up and done a lot for us. And how do we grow them? We grow them more based on need, based on what, and in those days, it was what the feds wanted. We had much more active participation from the federal government in the, let's say, in the days when I started to be in a policymaking position, let's say the late 90s till I left about 5 years ago. The feds were, it was the Rehab Services Administration is part of the U.S. Department of Education. They were our partners in funding for the Centers for Independent Living. They pretty much dictated where they wanted to, where they thought SILs should be and new ones should open, even though the state plan might have said something else. So they would announce when money became available. And so that's how that happened. And that's how we got, we recognized a city like Camden needed its own center for independent living. So it was very, very clear to the feds that they had that it was on the federal radar that Camden needed the assistance. So that's why we have Camden SIL, Camden City SIL, which is all by itself in Camden. And we have a county, one that covers Camden County and Gloucester County. That's the SIL SJ. So it's a little bit different. And then we have the way the state is determined, we get discretionary, the state gets discretionary money. And that's how the Centers for Independent Living that are considered Part B centers got started. They are the ones that their funding comes from Section 7, Part B, 722, 726 in the law that establishes the B centers, and you guys are one. The B centers are established as independent entities that live kind of under the tutelage of Division of Voc Rehab. So in other words, your money comes from a discretionary grant that gets whacked up 5 ways, which is not enough. So then the State Department of Labor gets another $525 for that in the budget, what they call grants and aid. And then there is some Social Security money thrown in so that it equals a little bit over $1 million that does get divided among the 5 centers. Luckily
that's really important to highlight for people, for the audience. There are B and C centers in New Jersey. C centers are just they get their money directly from the feds. Whereas,
We don't have to put up with anybody at DVR.
yeah, I know. I get jealous sometimes. I get jealous. So you see centers. Well, these centers are more under DVR.
Yeah. But yeah, so, with DVR can be helpful. I just wish the DVR understood sills better. I wish they understood the value, because then I'll tell you, as a rehab counselor, because in your soul, you're always going to be what you started out to be. And well, I started out as an English teacher, but that's a whole nother story. I'm a rehab counselor. I have to say that I used to enjoy being able to get referrals from the sill and then give them back to the sill when I was finished with them. Let's say we got a younger person into a career, and maybe he was in a technical school or some kind of a program. Well, when they came to us to talk about different things in the counseling and guidance piece, I would always say, have you gone to this sill? Maybe sometimes they had job groups. Sometimes maybe they just had parties. I mean, go to a party, go to a consumer meeting, go to something. So, and that's why I think it's very important to be able to have that as a resource. And they're drop-in guides, information and referral being one of the most paramount things that we do. You can get so much information now with computers. Of course, you can get it at the touch of a button. But in those days, you couldn't. You have to go get an armload of brochures, which we still do. We still have brochures out and available, and so we just give people information that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, Brian. How sills, people ask me all the time, like, how'd you get this job as a person with disability? I said, like, I showed up to a board meeting, started getting involved, and like the position opened up, and then I threw my resume. Like what you were saying, just show up and start connecting with people. Like, that's how opportunities happen. People don't knock on your door and offer you a job. Usually they don't knock on the door and say, I was in the neighborhood and I heard you wanted a job.
No, they don't do that.
You gotta make the connections, and if you stay around long enough and do a decent enough job, people find uses for you. So I think that's really important. Really shows what sills.
I think your history in your center, first of all, I like the people you dealt with, Bob Clay being one of them.
Yes.
I like those guys. I always have. Don't see much of them anymore, but I thought that they were not a bad fit for you. But I was not in a decision-making position at that time. I was sort of involved in all the DVR field offices. My last job from 2010 to 2017 was to go to all the 18 offices, which is why I chewed up about 4 cars over the time in New Jersey, because I live up north. I would have days where I was all over the place. And so I got a chance to really get a feel for what was going on in the field offices. And they're great places. They really are. Never lose faith in them. Sometimes they get you a little annoyed, but don't lose faith in them.
And I have a great relationship with my field office manager. I mean, they're great, and they're just doing their thing too. And I think, on both sides, I think we lose kind of the value of what both of us bring to the table sometimes. And I think sometimes we need to remember that. Like DVR wants to give people jobs. Well, to get people jobs, they need soft skills. They need to know how to show up on time and write a resume and interact with people and manage stress and and deal with conflict and all the different stuff, manage time that you have to deal with at work. And that's stuff that sills can help with. And sills can help people learn. So.
And it's not just the 14 to 21-year-olds, it's everybody. I mean, believe me, when I kind of specialized in mid-career folks and dealing with people who were somewhat sidelined because of an injury or a disability of some sort that became worse. And you have to reestablish yourself as a person and as a worker. And so I dealt with a lot of those folks. And I did deal with some young people who were going to college, et cetera. So yeah, a little bit of everything. But you've got to play the people. Getting people jobs is not easy. And people getting their own jobs is really not easy. So there's still some discrimination out there. There's just I would hope there'd be less now that everybody seems to need people. I mean, there's not a place you go that you don't see a help wanted sign yet. I don't think that the people are that willing to hire people.
Right. And I think also, we talk about this all the time as directors, everybody's benefits is tied to income. So they're always worried about working too much or losing this. So it is, there's a lot of system changes that need to happen.
I would
It'll
love
be
to see that change. Yeah, I really.
helpful. People still can't save more than $2,000 if they're on Medicaid. I mean, that just
We have
becomes
condemned people with disabilities to poverty. And it's not just the Medicaid thing. It is the Medicaid thing. It's DDD telling all the people who are on support coordination or, managing their own budgets that they have to be Medicaid eligible.
right.
It's a way to get Medicaid to pay for services. I understand that. But why not come up with some other way so that they could get a little wealth building?
Right.
No, there's no such thing as wealth building in this community unless you really take the chance. And I have right now, I gave a woman an opportunity she was a supported, not supported, she was in a supported employment program at the ARC. They brought her over, they said, do you think she could work in your office? And I said, sure, let's try her out. The girl's got a BA from college and she's terrific. And she's great on the phone. She's great in person. She's just great in general. But she is tied to the whole worry that she can't work more than 15 hours a week because we're keeping her under the limit of social.
Right.
Now, way back when, we used to try to find people reasons to get off of Social Security. We never had half-baked things where, okay, you could stay on for a little while, you could do that. We didn't have that. It was all or nothing, which wasn't a fair system either. Because, if you fail at the third month of your job, or maybe I take it back, the 15th month of your job, you can work that 1 year of substantial gainful activity, but if month 15 something goes radically wrong, you have to go through the whole rigmarole of getting back on benefits, and that's fearful. Look, nobody wants to be without medical. Nobody wants.
Nobody, exactly.
Very clear in the whole American Care Act. Never, it was never about one thing or another. It was about having good medical benefits that would not break you. You don't want to, or there's nothing worse than looking at senior citizens that are cutting their pills in half because they can only afford half of the Medicaid.
Right. And when you're a person with disability, your insurance is everything for a lot of people.
Absolutely. To get off of it, and workability was the panacea when it first started. They kind of played with that a little bit too much too. So I mean, I'm not sure where we're at with Medicare. What is
MJ workability?
Yeah.
Which is, for those of you that don't know, a state program that does allow you to make income and keep your Medicaid. So, but that's just our state. And like you said, that's not perfect either. So I wish nationally we could get some reform where people would, like you said, we shouldn't condemn people to poverty. We don't want people with disabilities to be working and contributing and paying taxes. Like I don't understand why we would want to discourage that from happening.
Well, we discourage other things too. We had a kid, everybody's a kid to me. He got married. He was of another culture and had an arranged marriage. And, the wife showed up and got a job immediately in a nursing home as an LPN or a CNA. I can't remember which. She knocked him off Medicaid because she was earning an income that was standard wage. Right. And there was no way ahead to get. So there's a marriage penalty that nobody talks about because nobody thinks that people with disabilities get married.
Exactly.
And this fella got married and very successfully at it, but it didn't help him. I wish there was the loophole that said, well, if you get married for the first 5 years of your marriage, you can earn whatever.
And or just, let people get married and not count it, because there are so much benefits to people getting married. Like, there's societal.
Amazing.
There are social benefits. So why would we want to discourage that? And that's a good point. You made this point, Brian, that I think a lot of overt discrimination we made progress in that, but there's still kind of discrimination built in the system. What you just talked about, how the system assumes like that people with disabilities don't get married. So, the system still kind of assumes that people with disabilities, like, why are you working anyway? You're disabled. Like, it's still kind of built in. So
it's okay to discriminate against people with disabilities, don't you know? I mean, it seems like it's the last one. All the discussions of pride, et cetera, disability still, it seems okay that, people get away with a lot of stuff. And, I mean, I'll throw ageism in only because I grew into this, but, there's a lot of ageism too out there, but the attitude, and you know what? It's not a malicious attitude, Don. It's a lot of people want to take care of people with disabilities,
Right.
and they feel that's our duty as Americans that we should take care of them, but we should allow them, us, to do whatever we can do.
Right.
And that's why I always found this to be fascinating work, only because why would you stand in somebody's way?
Right. Why would you take away somebody's ability to take care of themselves? If they need your help, let them tell you.
Yeah.
But why would you not want them to start their own, have their own life, build their own wealth, have their own income, have their own marriage? So you're right. It's still that patronizing pat on the head thing sometimes, where it's like, we'll just take care of you, and you know, don't work, don't get married, and it can be very destructive also.
At the very least.
Yes. So how did you end up at HIP? So you went through DVR. I liked your 3 stages, the 3 phases of Brian.
Well, there was not a 4th stage. It was Buddha's ass out the door. No, basically, well, I was of the age. I was working there 42 years for the same. I worked for the same outfit for 42 years, but I never had the same job over the whole period of time. I had every professional title in the agency. And I kid around, except janitor. And then one day I was at a meeting and somebody threw a piece of paper on the floor and said, pick that up, and said, oh, now you're the janitor. I said, well, thanks a lot. But, I did my time, and I just decided, when I heard that this was opening up, I said, you know, I needed a place to land. I knew I'm not a golfer. I knew I wanted to do something else with my life. And I didn't want to just out and out retire. I may have done things a little too quickly, because today, as a matter of fact, it's funny. Today, it's 5 years since I left the agency. And 2 weeks later, I started at HIP. So I gave myself a 2-week vacation and didn't go anywhere, didn't do anything. But, you know, it was funny. I just slid right back in. And it didn't hurt that it's 2 miles away from home, where
that's
the
awesome.
job was incredibly all over the place. And I mean, at my retirement dinner, I think I said I logged in 1.3 million miles, just adding up all of my cars and their mileages. You know how some guys remember when the mileage turned over 200,000? I used to remember when it would do 200,000. So I was able to kind of make a joke out of that. And my Easy Pass, I didn't want to tell you. I think we used to have the American Express turned up to like $350 a month. But now it's like I spend $25 on Easy Pass, it's a lot. So it's so those little considerations, economic as it turns out. And you know, I needed a little. I thought I was going to be a little bit more relaxed in this job. This job turns out, I will tell you, very intense. And it's almost a 24/7. I mean, it's really a lot of craziness. That
a lot of it's hard to explain unless you've done it. It's hard to, like, there's always something going on. And
well, they see these titles, and the guy, I've had friends that say, well, you're president CEO, you should have people for that. I said, no, usually it's me. One of my first duties as a sign was picking a mouse off the floor, a dead one. It was there, and you know, somebody had to pick it up. So who do you think?
Right. That's because it's still, you know, we're
workers.
Yeah, we're workers, and we're still underfunded, and we're still under, you know, it's still grassroots at its core in a way. It's still like what you said. I've had that line too. Don't you have people? I'm like, yeah, I got people, but they're doing 6 other things. So, you know. Yeah. So, and they're like, can't you just, my favorite line I always hear is, can't you just hire somebody? I'm like, what do you think? We're hiding money? Like there's a secret stash of money I haven't been using, but so I understand your situation, and it can be intense, very rewarding, but very intense. How do you think SILs are different than other disability organizations, as somebody who's been kind of like seeing everything evolve? Do you think SILs kind of have a different approach?
Which ones, like the county offices on disability?
Yeah, like other any entity, or the SILs have kind of a different philosophy, you think?
I don't know. I guess it depends on who they relate to funding wise. It could be now with the AAA, the aging resource people. They've become very much involved in the world of service delivery, and many of the offices on disability services have been combined with the offices on aging in the counties. So they follow that model of helping people in first and foremost if they are of an age, but then helping them more. They just I don't think they generate independent, they don't have independent living plans, but what they do is they just kind of give people things and make them aware of things, where I think we dig in just a little bit more. When you look at all of the 12 centers that are throughout New Jersey, everybody does something very different but the same. I mean, it's all dedicated to promoting freedom among people with disabilities, but it's also, we do it all differently. I mean, I'm sure I'm doing a whole bunch of different stuff than you are,
Right.
just by having, just by my geography here. And, and if those ILs that are located in more rural areas are doing even other things, I mean, some of them are taking they're taking the place of what county government does up here. Our county governments in both Hudson and Bergen are very robust engines for employment for people, period, not with people with disabilities, but they are, and the local elected officials are very, very protective and proud of what they do. And so there's almost they are kind of like the big brother of everybody in these counties. In some counties, the county government doesn't want anything to do with anybody, so because they don't have the manpower. Our county government have a lot of people working for them, so that could be a little different.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's talk about HIP specifically. As I understand it, you were talking about how cells are different. HIP, didn't they do a lot for blind and visually impaired? Yeah. Wasn't that kind of their calling card?
Well, because Eileen was of low vision and ultimately blind, we did have some recreation programs that were geared toward those people who are blind, like skiing programs called the ABLE program, like hiking and different things like that for people. And so now we kind of work with low vision. We have 6 adjustments to low vision groups. Led by a person with low vision. We had a statewide program called LEAD, which was kind of loosely, it was what the new Commission for the Blind program, EDGE, is based on. So it was kind of like, different milestones in people's lives. But we also, as a project, because we're a 501c3, we have a Braille business. So we do brailing for 44 states, school books. And we do programs and documents and different things like that. And we've worked for a whole bunch of different people. Obviously, Braille is not what it was, but it is still a form of literacy for people with that vision loss and blindness. And so we do think it's a valid thing for people to be learning as young people. I don't want to make this analogy, but it's kind of like cursive writing. Nobody writes cursive anymore, but yet I think people need to learn how to do Braille. If they're a kid coming up and they need to know that's a literacy piece for them. So that's what we do.
Right. I like the analogy with cursive, how I remember being told in school, you have to learn cursive or like you can't make it as an adult. And now I really don't know it. My mom's got great cursive handwriting. Great.
Well, any of us who went the Palmer method, they used to call it Palmer method, Palmer. And if you were Catholic and you were Catholic,
yes.
Catholic school, you have some sore knuckles because somebody was beating the hell out of you.
Yeah.
You wrote right. And I had a fantastic handwriting, but until my tremor took over and my computers got busy, my writing is terrible. So
Yeah, computers really changed. It just changed the necessity of it. If somebody hands you something, you're like, why don't you type this if it's important? So
exactly.
Yeah, and so what do you do? What is your cell working on now? I always, we see each other all the time at our directors meetings, but I always want to know more about kind of what the other centers are doing. So what have you guys been?
We've split ourselves up into several divisions. We do some work for the county. We have county grants they're called peer grouping grants. They come out of the community development in the state. One of them is we provide the materials for ramps. That's called a modification access project. And we've gotten very lucky because we work with who are the Bergen County inmates. They have a training program. And so we'll buy the wood and they will build the ramp under the supervision of some very creative construction types that work for the sheriff's department. So we work with them. We work with special needs equipment. So we get little things like walkers and, those great walkers, the rollators, and, maybe a transporter chair or something like that. So we do that. We did, just like I said, start donation program where we rented 2 storage facilities, one in Hudson and one in Bergen, and a van to run the stuff around to start to collect, and I'm hoping someday refurbish equipment so that we can be redistributed to different places. This has been done in South Jersey with Goodwill Home, I think it's called, and they have a fantastic showroom of stuff that nice canes, scooters, and stuff. We're not up to that. We have walkers and a few rollers and a couple of transporter chairs, but that's about it. But on the weekend when Father's Day or Mother's Day, when grandma or grandpa want to go out to eat with the whole family and they have this gigantically heavy, horrible chair, you can get a little support, a little, what they call a transporter chair with the smaller wheels. And that's easy to manipulate into a restaurant or any place, into a theater. So, those are the kinds of things we're going to give away. Not beds, though. Beds are hard. Beds are very difficult to dispose of. And some durable medical equipment we manage. But I'm hoping. I did have a fantasy at some point that we maybe go to the local training facility and see if people couldn't at least detail some of these wheelchairs. Just
that's a good idea.
Make them look good, and then we can then give them away. But we're collecting things. We seem to be collecting a lot of supplies too. So that's one of the things we've done. We do support coordination for DDD. So, we do get people with developmental disabilities on the road and how they spend their budgets and do different things like that. We do a lot of advocacy and a lot of, we had a good program not long ago called Safe and Secure Solutions, which we bought a bunch of, those lock boxes that the real estate agents use, and the little thing that goes on your doorknob, so that you could give the Meals on Wheels guy your code. This is before the Ring and the bell and all those.
Awesome.
And they could open your front door and leave your package. This way you didn't have to get up off your chair or interrupt the TV show or whatever. And and they would put the key back. It was so much better than leaving your key in the flower pot or underneath.
Right. It's so much safer.
Yeah, yeah. So we did a lot of that, and then it's funny. I use one myself, believe it or not. I don't want to lock myself out of the house more than once a year. So I mean, it's be able to know where my key is, and I don't have to call a neighbor or anything like that.
That's awesome. And did the pandemic change things at all? I know we're like halfway in this pandemic, halfway out of this pandemic. It's a never-ending story of our lives. It's like a bad TV show that won't end. But
we did a lot of
the pandemic change how you delivered services?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, first of all, we can't let anybody in without an appointment. So forget about dropping in anymore, right now. But the one thing about the pandemic, and it's about 2 years ago, we came back to the office. We were no longer doing remote. We started to come back to the office on a regular basis. But naturally, every now and then there'd be a COVID outbreak and we'd have to go back into the lockdown, et cetera. But what we did do with our CARES Act money, because we got some money from the feds directly for CARES Act, and we did some interesting things with the money. One of the things I'm most happy with, I don't know if the Fed's going to like it or not, but it was a very good thing to do. You know how FEMA was pushing all of the disaster bags where you had to pack a bag to go, a go bag. Well, I decided that since we were never going anywhere, we had to have stay bags. So we got some bags, some nylon bags with our logo on it, and we filled them with things that you could stay home with. In other words, we filled them with a set of light bulbs, four set of light bulbs, a pack of note cards, a pack of Forever stamps, which I wish we bought more of, considering they just went up another 2 cents, some soaps and sanitizers and different things like that, put them in this bag, and then distributed them through the Meals on Wheels program. We have a couple of friends that run Meals on Wheels, so we ran them up, and on the day that all the pickups come, we were in the parking lot distributing our stuff so they could go with each with each Meals on Wheels delivery. And that was a lot of fun. It was very interesting to be, first of all, to see all of the wonderful people who work on Meals on Wheels, many older couples that do it together, and they do it as their thing. And then just in general, just be able to get this stuff out to people, you know. But
I think that's awesome.
I did it a second time. For kosher meals, I ditched the light bulbs and I bought batteries and flashlights because light bulbs break. And unfortunately, you know, I had a troop of Girl Scouts, you know, stuffing the bags, and every now and then you'd hear a clink, so you knew that you lost the light bulb. So
yes,
worked out better.
Yes, good modification there.
Yeah,
good modification. Well, I think this has been great. I love talking about the history, and I love talking about what your show is doing. Is there anything as we wrap up here, because I could talk to you forever, Brian, just about the, you know, how sales started and all that stuff. But is there anything you want to promote? Anything you want to, anything you got upcoming? Any, you know?
Right now, I would just promote my website, which I'm very happy with. It's HIPCIL, hipsil.org. Please take a look at it and see if there's any questions, you have anything. We put a lot of information on there. We just had, I missed the drawing. We just had our calendar raffle. We have a 66 days of summer raffle. So every Wednesday we do a drawing, and we post the names on there. And I would recommend this, by the way, as a good fundraiser, because it's a fun fundraiser. You get to pick a season, and if you want to get busy and do it for the fall, you could do a football theme. You could do something like that. We just use summer theme as our thing, where we sell one raffle ticket for $25. And we tear off the bottom, put it in a barrel, and draw it up to 66 times. Because when you win, we throw you back, and you pick again. You could win again. We've had several people win twice this year, just
awesome,
because it got thrown back in.
Yeah, that is a good idea, and it seems easy, which is
it's very easy. And we didn't dream it up. I think Dawn, Carmela's place, they did it first.
Yeah, it seems like a Carmel. I think she would come up with some creative, cool, and like
fun.
That. So that's awesome. So visit Brian's website. They have a great website. When I was redesigning our website, I was looking at yours because I liked how it looked, and it's a great center. And I think Brian, one of the keys he said was, you know, sales are about getting involved. So get involved. If you have nothing, if you're looking for something to do and you have any connection to disability, reach out to the cell in your area, and that's a great way to get started and to find opportunities. Like I said, if you're looking for a job, you know, you might say, "Oh, cells don't have jobs." You don't know what they have until you ask. So
and you can create your own job at a cell too. If you
yes, that's a great point. So thank you so much for doing this, Brian. I'm sure I'll have you on again.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Take care.